But really, what you realize as you get older is that your family, is the most important thing. I know that we're going to talk about my biological father here shortly, right?
Yeah.
So, I've known that, my mother introduced me to my father when I was 13 years old. We went down to the Robert Meyer Hotel down at downtown Jacksonville. And it was kind of an awkward meeting, but I understood. I was old enough to understand what was happening because I had never met him before. And so I tried to have a relationship with him, and he was, didn't have a lot of redeeming qualities, and so that didn't work. But I guess the point is I was okay with that. I kind of cut him off, and I didn't have any sense of longing or sense of insecurity about my past or how I came into this world. And I was really okay with that. And I think that surprises even me, because obviously lots of folks have hang-ups about their past or whatever. But I never had that. I never had that sense of insecurity. And my youngest sons, Brett, they have 3 beautiful girls. His first girl, Emily, they brought home from the hospital, and she's gorgeous. Her mother's last name is Murphy, and she's Irish. Had a beautiful reddish hair, and I told Brett she could be a poster girl. But they discovered that she was born deaf about, 8 or 9 months after she'd been home. And she's so smart, she was able to read lips and stuff as an infant. And so Jan, we found out, Brett really got into, she's what he calls vanilla deaf. In other words, she's perfect in every way, she just can't hear. And so they discovered that, for that to happen, there's usually a variant in both parents. And so that sent Jan on a quest to find out did I have a deafness in my family? So she ordered a couple of 23andMe tests, and she filled one out in the questionnaire, and you give them a sample of your saliva in a tube. I did it about 6 or 9 months later, and she filled out my questionnaire for me. And she said, "Would you be surprised to learn that you have a half sibling?" And I said, "No, not at all," because I had been introduced to who I thought my father was, and I knew his past. So lo and behold, we get my test back, and it states that I have a half sister. And so at that stage in the 23andMe, you can exchange telephone numbers, but it's up to both people to make contact. And then when they make contact, they don't necessarily tell you what their name is or what your name is, because you don't really know what you're getting into. So I had a half sister, and they determined that by determining the amount of DNA that you share. They can determine if you're your first cousin, fourth cousin, father, whatever. So I had a sister. And so she was excited, and she called, and we had a conversation. Then we had another conversation. And I think during the second conversation, she said that I didn't have just one sister, I had 3 sisters. And Jan and I think we had several calls, and the next call we set up, we were prepared to tell her that her father, we assumed that my biological father was her father, and her mother had put her up for adoption, and that's why she was on her quest to find out her heritage. Well, we're 5 minutes into the conversation, and I'm not telling her who her father is, she's telling me who my father is. And Jan's looking at the paperwork and sees that I have a little bit more DNA with her father than she did. And so, Jan says, she's looking at me and she says, she's right. And that was an eye-opener. And come to find out, after maybe another conversation or two, my father's living, and he never had a son. Well, I tell you what, I'm looking more like him now that I'm older. He's 91, he's still living, and but the interesting thing was the part that was we lost a whole year because the 2 of the 3 sisters said, "We don't know what this is going to do to our mother. We don't know if our dad was engaged or dating my mother." So they finally, one of the sisters blurted out, "Mom, Dad has a son." And she said, "You mean I have a son too?" And she's a sweetheart. She's living too. And so, you know, after that, Jan and I drove to Mobile, Alabama, where one of my two sisters lived. The other sister lives in Huntsville, Alabama. And we went into a restaurant, and they walked in the door, and you know, we had dinner, and we spent the weekend at their house, and you know, it was very pleasant. I had gotten used to the idea that, you know, it's my biological father, but you know, it's really just one senior citizen getting ready to meet another one. You know, but we have an interesting bond, but it's not like, you know, we were in each other's lives. He said, Harry, he says, if my parents would have known that I had you, they would have raised you. They would have raised you. And I wasn't going to tell my mother. My mother was still living at that point in time. She died 2 or 3 years ago. And I finally told her, I said, you know, the fellow you introduced me to wasn't my father. What? What? You know, she was clueless. So, unfortunately, his health is failing, and the interesting thing was that for him is that he was in Pensacola when he and my mother met. He was a naval flight candidate. He told me, he said, Harry, he said, the Marines were recruiting 20 pilots from the Navy. And he said, you know, I knew that if I became a Marine pilot, I'd get a fighter jet, and that's really what I wanted. So I have a picture down my hallway of him in front of his fighter jet with his name on it. And so he said after he was in the Marines for 4 or 5 years, got out, he actually went back to school and got a engineering degree, but all of his, you know, comrades in the Marines were joining the airlines. And so he started with Pan American Airways as a navigator, eventually co-pilot and pilot flying 747s internationally for 30 years.